Welcome. My name is Renee Forsyth. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Lyme Connect. And to provide a visual description, I am a white female with shoulder length brown hair. I'm wearing a pink top tonight, and I'm sitting in front of a Lyme branded green background. And we're thrilled that you could join us today to talk a little bit more about how you can create an accessible recruiting process. So over the next few minutes, we'll talk about who we are at Lyme Connect, a little bit more about disability in detail, what you might need to know about candidates with disabilities, how you can support these candidates with disabilities, and what additional tools and resources can help you. So first of all, some of you may be new to Lyme Connect. If that is the case, welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to rebrand disability through achievement. We do that by attracting, preparing, and connecting high potential university students and professionals and veterans who have all different types of disabilities. We invite them to join our network. Once they join our network, they are eligible to apply for scholarships, leadership programs, internships, and full-time careers with the world's leading corporations. All of you are corporate partners. If you are joining us, that means you are a member of one of our corporate partner organizations or an employee of one of our corporate partners. And as part of the partnership, we also support you in recruiting, onboarding, developing, retaining, and promoting all employees who have disabilities. So if you're joining us and you are a person with a disability, we encourage you to join as a network member and take advantage of all of the resources that our network members are able to take advantage of. There's no fee to join the network or to take it to participate or take advantage of any of the resources. If you're not a person with a disability, or even if you are, we also encourage you to join as a corporate partner, and that's where you can access all of the training and education resources. So let's talk a little bit about disability just to set the stage for the rest of the slides. Whether you're joining us from the US or Canada, disability is defined as a physical or mental condition that substantially limits one or more major life activities. In the US, we know that approximately 61 million adults have a disability, and in Canada, that's approximately 8 million adults, equating to almost 1 in 4 North Americans. To dig deeper into the statistics, and this may be particularly relevant for you if you are involved in recruiting university students, we know that, or statistics show that about 1 in 5 students on university campuses has a disability. We're even starting to see that number increase. And we did some research a few years ago with the Center for Talent and Innovation, and through that research discovered that almost 1 in 3, or approximately 30% of all white-collar corporate employees has a disability. So if you're thinking 1 in 3, I'm looking around my team or looking around the office, I don't see anyone who has a disability, that is possible, but probably not likely. And one of the reasons is that almost 2/3 of all disabilities are not visible or not apparent unless someone chooses to share that they have a disability. So some of those non-visible disabilities include learning and attention issues, medical conditions, mental health conditions, and more. And just to fully look at the way a disability might impact an individual and how broad the definition can be, it could impact an individual's ability to learn, or they may have attention issues. It could impact them intellectually. It also may impact their memory. Mental health conditions is also a broad umbrella for disability, a lot of different mental health conditions, and that includes anxiety and depression. It may impact their ability to communicate. They might have a physical disability, which might be evident upon meeting someone, perhaps if they're in a wheelchair or they are an amputee, for example. But they also may live with a chronic health condition that may not be apparent to you unless they choose to share that with you. Certainly, sensory disabilities are things that people think about when they hear the word disability, such as deaf or blind, but that can also be a spectrum in terms of low vision or hard of hearing. or they may have difficulty forming social relationships. So as you can see, it's pretty comprehensive. This may not include exactly everything, but it gives you an understanding that the definition of disability is broad reaching. And what I like about the next slide is that it's not just the way the disability impacts the individual, it's when they encounter a barrier in society that they're not fully and equally able to participate in any given situation. So think about that when it comes to your particular recruiting process and how you can remove some of these barriers for candidates with disabilities. So think about your technology, and we'll talk a little bit about, we'll go into more detail on that. But is it accessible for people with all different types of disabilities? If you're having an event or having an interview in person in a physical space, is it accessible for disabilities? What's your policy around requesting an accommodation for a candidate? And then how do you put that into practice and make sure that they get what they need? What assumptions do you bring into the recruiting process? And just to put it out there, this is not a place of judgment. It's really, we all live with assumptions. So it's just how are they coming into play, and how do we make sure that we keep them in check when it might come to candidates with disabilities? What language and action is going to create a open environment, a trusting relationship with candidates? And all of these things, if put into practice, will create a culture that is inclusive of people with disabilities. One of the things that can be really daunting for people is language. And so it's important for us to address that during this presentation. And really what we like to say is that you need to defer to the person for their preferred language. So some people might say, I'm a person with a disability, or have a person first approach to talking about disability. I'm a person with a disability, but that's only one characteristic of me. There's many other aspects to who I am. Other people say, no, I'm disabled. It's a core part of my identity, and it's not a bad word. So don't be afraid to call me disabled, or, use the word disabled. There is language that is dated or victimizing that you'd want to avoid, such as handicapped or crippled. Those are words we don't generally use. Suffering from a disability is you're making that assumption that they are suffering when they may not see themselves as suffering. Special needs, well, that might be used in a younger educational setting. That's not something you would use in a professional setting. Or generally any euphemism that is trying to make disability sound more easier to kind of incorporate. People say, just call it what it is. It's disability or disabled, and it's not a bad word. You also want to be aware of unintended offensive language. So examples might be, oh, I'm really organizing myself today. My OCD is acting up, or I almost had a panic attack. So really any reference to disability when you really don't live with that disability or aren't experiencing those things doesn't really set a call. If those kinds of comments are being made, it doesn't really set a tone for people to feel safe and trust that they can share about their disability. So I think it's just really important to tune into those references and make sure that they're not happening in your environment. So what do I need to know about candidates with disabilities? We know that the role of the recruiter is so essential in a candidate's experience. My former life was a recruiter, so I know how critical that is as the face of the company. So establishing a trusting relationship can be really critical in making sure that candidates know that they can disclose, request an accommodation so that they are their most effective in the recruiting process. So in the next couple slides, we'll talk about the disclosure decision, how you can take some steps to create an accessible recruiting process, talk about how disability might present in the recruiting process, and again, just circle back on assumptions. So we do a lot of coaching of people who are living with disabilities, and they often wonder if they should disclose. That's one of the topics that we coach around. And I will just say that we never tell someone that they should disclose. It's a conversation and it's a decision process about whether to disclose to set yourself up for success, and then when and how to do it so that it's most effective. Just to talk about the weather piece, because I think that's really important for you as a recruiter to understand why people might choose not to disclose. So these are some of the top concerns that we've heard over the years about why people might choose not to disclose. And these are actual quotes from our network members. The belief that people will judge me before they know me. I tell people only what is relevant to the situation, and I try to tell them as little as possible because I know they'll think of me as different and potentially inept. They might have fear of negative reactions or perceptions. Always requesting accommodations and disclosing can be hard. It is like you're always explaining and answering questions and receiving either petty remarks or hero remarks about how you do what you do. Some people have concerns that it will impact my career. If I am one of two candidates that a company is considering and I disclose that I have a disability and need an accommodation to do the job, why would they choose to hire me? And we've had many people who have had a situation where they disclosed and then they never heard from the company again, or offers were withdrawn. And so all of those former experiences come into the decision-making process. Or whether you live with a disability or not, I think this comment is very relevant in general. Don't know how to have the conversation about their disability, but as this comment says, there aren't many opportunities in the workplace where a discussion of vulnerability takes place in a frank manner. And I would say in the recruiting process, in this very, very competitive environment, feeling that vulnerability or feeling like it might be held against them is definitely a reason why people would choose not to disclose. However, that doesn't allow them to do their best in the interview process. So these are some of the different touch points that people might choose to disclose. They might make that decision when they're applying. Even checking off that form, that self-ID form, is a decision process for them because people generally don't know what is done with that information. Yes, I'm a person with a disability. No, I'm not, or I choose not to disclose. They may choose to disclose prior to the interview if they have enough information about what the interview is going to entail, and they know they need an accommodation and they have an avenue for which to request that accommodation. That may be a time when they choose to disclose. They may choose to disclose during the interview, and that may be because they're trying to feel out if this will be an environment that's supportive of them with a disability. Maybe they're just sharing an example of why, how they've overcome a challenge or a strength that they have, or maybe they actually need to request an accommodation. Often people choose to disclose after they receive the offer, when they feel more confident that you're invested in them, but they know that they need something to be successful prior to the start date. Or they can choose to disclose, even if they haven't disclosed till this point, once they're employed. What's not on here is that they choose never to disclose, and that may be okay for them. That may be a personal choice. But in many cases, they could be so much more effective and demonstrate why they're a great candidate if they just had maybe a simple accommodation. So think about your own recruiting process and the accessibility of it, and some of the technology that you're using and the programs that are coming to play. That's often, I'm sure many of you are using technology as an entry point to gather resumes for people to apply. Is it even accessible for people to get that far? And where are the accessibility uh, are there accessibility features that are activated and available to candidates? If you're using assessments, that's probably a whole other conversation. Some of those can be really challenging for people with disabilities, depending on how those assessments are designed. So think about that and how they come into play. And then again, your interviews. What are the options for people who are interviewing? If they're using technology, is it only a phone call? Is there an option to request a video call? Are they in person? All of those things come into play when thinking about accessibility. And then when you either whether you're interviewing yourself or you're managing the debrief with other interviewers, sometimes disability presents in a way that can be challenging or misunderstood. So there can be characteristics that show up in an interview, such as a lack of interest or passion, or in some cases, maybe people, because of their disability, aren't able to demonstrate that passion. And I know people look for people, candidates who are really excited about the job or excited about the company. Maybe they're on medication that doesn't allow them to have that kind of emotional response. They might appear to be distracted. For example, if they are on an interview, a virtual interview, and they're having challenges with finding candidates. We have people who are low vision. I'm sorry, they have challenges with finding the recruiter or seeing where to click. That might appear like they're not focused, and they're distracted, but really it's due to the issues they're having with the technology. Or they might appear to be disengaged. We talked about the difficulty that some people have in forming social relationships. Sometimes the small talk in networking settings or in interviewing settings can be really difficult for people. So they feel like they're not connecting or disengaged, and it's really just related to their disability. Also, some of the standard recruiting practices that we all think are very important sometimes, people may not be able to make eye contact. We've had people say, should I tell the person that I'm low vision and I won't be able to make eye contact right when I introduce myself? Some people aren't able to have a strong handshake, or maybe they're not able to dress in the business attire that might be expected in some situations. So all of those things can come into play, and it really comes down to thinking, are these essential to the essential functions of the job? And then we talked a little bit about some assumptions, and I love this image that says, limiting beliefs do not equal facts. So just because I, as an interviewer, may see someone with a certain type of disability, and I may think, how could they possibly do this job or this aspect of this job, does not make it true. So the opportunities to really allow the space for the candidate to demonstrate how they have the skills or demonstrate how they've done a similar job in the past. And we love this quote from one of our network members who says, sometimes with disabilities, the bar is set very low. Even just going to college can be seen as this great success, but that doesn't set a path for reaching a really high level of potential. And Lyme Connect doesn't settle for that. And it's really our Lyme network members who don't settle for that. They are amazingly accomplished, and they bring all of these unique strengths and skills to every situation, but certainly to the workplace. We're constantly talking to our network members, but also did a survey and said, how has your disability impacted you? And they came back with all of these amazing strengths that they developed as a result of living with their disability, not despite living with their disability. So some examples, they became an incredible problem solver because they always had to navigate a world that wasn't accessible for them. They took on leadership on campus or in the workplace, or maybe in their personal life, to advocate for themselves um, in their in every medical appointment. They might be a unique strategic thinker because they've always had to learn a little bit differently. We have people say that they're incredibly organized because they're never sure when their symptoms might flare up, so they always deliver ahead of time. And then determination and resilience were words that came up over and over again. And these are all strengths that people would bring to a team and contribute to the workplace. We also heard some amazing stories about specialized skills that people developed that they relate to living with their particular disability. Now, I won't caution here and say we never say, oh, if you live with this type of disability, then you're going to be good at this role. So we don't want to put people in a box like that. But really, the recruiting process and your role and anybody who's interviewing is really about making that space for people to demonstrate how they have the skills that they need for the job. So we've had people talk about how they realize that they're able to see patterns that their peers aren't able to see. some people talked about the way their brain works, that they are able to develop systems in the workplace that made their department and their company much more efficient. Other people talk about having a curiosity and a creative approach to learning because they live with learning disabilities. So they're always able to ask questions that get to a better solution, or they're able to see who in the room isn't understanding the presentation and present it in a different, more creative way. So it adapts to different learners. We had an example of someone who's an attorney who is blind, and he said he's honed his listening skills so well that he can always tell in mediation when someone's wavering. So it makes him really effective in that role. Some examples of managers is that they have a unique empathy because they've lived with a disability, and they know that each of their team members has individual needs, and as a result they're able to get the most out of their team. And I think in my 10 years at Lyme, what I've seen that's amazed me the most is how people have used technology and worked on technology in technology roles or technology assignments to really make huge advancements and make everything a little bit more accessible for the world. So oftentimes people who live with certain disabilities use technology to gain access. And so they have a unique perspective on the use of technology and just accessibility in general, which is really valuable to, excuse me, many companies. So how can I support candidates with disabilities? I'd say we'll do this cycle of action, and I'll talk through how you can assess, raise awareness, ask some questions, and accommodate. So first off, if you can take away from this webinar to go back and really assess your recruiting process, review it with a new lens, think about different disabilities and how they might be impacted during each step of the process. Starting with, well, it's probably starting even earlier than that, but think about your job descriptions, and do they read with just desired qualifications that might be off-putting to some people if they feel like they don't meet those requirements. Some people might read job descriptions very literally and not even apply because they don't feel that they meet the requirements. Review the accessibility features of your technology. We know that many companies say that they are fully accessible, and they might be accessible to an extent, but make sure that it's as fully accessible as possible, and go back and challenge any company that you're working with if you're getting feedback that some of that technology isn't accessible. Share as much information as you can with the candidates so that they know if they need to request an accommodation at any step in the process. If you're going to have a super day and you have 4 interviews set up, is there a break in the interview? Will someone be able to access medication or food if they need to? There are a lot of factors that go into play. So as much detail as you can give will allow people to understand if they have to request an accommodation. And then make sure that the request process is clear and responsive. And we'll talk about that in a minute. This is a quote from someone who said, the company worked with me every step, and I remembered I had accommodations I needed throughout each round. So this was a really positive experience for that person. Go back and continue to raise awareness around disability. Is disability in your diversity statement? Is your disability ERG highlighted on your website? Is accessibility and hiring people with disabilities a business imperative? Are your hiring managers going to care? Do they want to learn about how to support candidates with disabilities through the process? All of these things are kind of outward statements to candidates that indicate that you are a company that is supportive of people with disabilities. And really, people look for those signals of support at the stage of even applying. And then we also have training for interviewers and managers. So those trainings are available through Lyme Connect as well as one of the benefits. But if you're just talking with people, try to, indicate what the value is in hiring a diverse team, and encourage people to really look at the broad spectrum of people who could join the team. Understand how disability might show up in the recruiting process. This is not to suggest that you're supposed to be a mind reader or that everything that might show up in an interview is related to a disability. You can't be expected to know that. But it's really just being aware of your own assumptions, any unintentional bias that might be showing up in the debrief process, and really always bringing it back to, does this candidate have the ability to perform the essential functions of the job? It also may come up that people say, well, they have an unfair advantage if they're getting an accommodation during the recruiting process or in the workplace. And really just reiterating that the intention of accommodations is to level the playing field and to provide people with just what they need to be effective in the process. It's not giving them an unfair advantage. And then ask candidates what they need to be successful. And that's across the board. Ask every candidate what they need to be successful in every step of the process. So one way you can do that is to just put something in your signature if you're communicating with candidates about how they can request an accommodation, or how you're there to support them. If there are standard accommodations that are going to be offered in any setting, make sure that those are listed. Maybe you have live captions available. Maybe people can use their own device if they're doing a coding challenge. Whatever it might be, it's great to highlight those because it's already another signal to the candidates that you're thinking about accommodations and making sure people are set up to do their best. If people are having difficulty during the process, even as early as filling out an assessment, or if they are having trouble with the technology to even apply, where does that feedback go? And how does someone get responded to? I think that's what the biggest issue is, that people don't get responses when they submit a request to a general accommodations mailbox. So make sure that that's responded to. And ensure all your interviewers throughout the process are informed about any accommodations that have been approved and are being implemented. So the interviewers really just need to know that they need to implement the accommodation that is being granted, and they don't need to know any kind of background information that you might know. As this network member said, they continuously followed up and asked if the accommodations they gave me were appropriate and if I needed to speak to anyone else to get a sense of how they can better address my needs. So providing accommodations, this may be the really valuable thing that you can go back and review and check what your accommodation process looks like. Is it obvious and clear, or is it hidden somewhere deep in some of the directions of completing a recorded interview, for example? So make it as obvious and clear as possible. If you can give the person a human to reach out to directly, and so that they can ask in an individualized way rather than just a general mailbox, that's really helpful. That goes a long way. If it is a general mailbox, make sure it's monitored and responded to in a timely manner. I would say the number one issue that I hear with people I'm coaching is that they have to complete a recorded interview in 72 hours. They've requested accommodation and they don't hear back in that time frame. So if your turnaround time is not that quick, try to figure out another way to offer accommodations to individuals who need it. And don't just say, well, there's default settings. They can request extra time or they can turn on captions. Those are good, but they don't always work for everyone. So make sure that there's other options beyond those. And we have a positive and a negative experience here. When the technology wasn't accessible and no one responded to my request for an accommodation, it negatively impacted my view of the company And it was clear to me that this company is not supportive of people with disabilities. Whereas somebody else said the company's recruiters were very helpful in getting accommodations for my application process, and it made me really excited to join the company. So you can see how those different experiences make a a difference in the candidates' desire to join that company. So just a couple more slides, if you can hang with me. My candidate disclosed what now? So what do you say in that instance? Well, hopefully we've demonstrated that the decision is really personal. So first of all, receive that from one human to another, and just recognize that it may have been a difficult decision for them to, a thing for them to share with you. And you can say something like, thank you for sharing this with me. You help me understand if you will need an accommodation to be maybe successful in this role, to be successful during the recruiting process? So it could go either way, depending on at what point they're asking you for that accommodation or they're disclosing to you. And then do something with that information. Know what to do next. And you may not know in that scenario, but be sure that you do follow up and then you do get the help that you need to figure out what could be next for this candidate. And you can say something like, I'm going to contact the appropriate people to identify next steps and discuss what options we have for supporting you. So it's not a guarantee. You're not promising anything in that moment unless you have the authority and the ability to do that, then certainly do that. But this gives you a way to go say, let me gather the information and I'll come back to you. So finally, what tools and resources can help you during this process? Well, we can. That's why we're partners with you. And the way we work together is that we promote all of your roles and all of your key opportunities. So we scrape your uh, job roles, your job portals every day. No matter what company you're coming from as a line partner, we pull in all of your roles every day into our own portal. We also are happy to highlight any key opportunities you have, any programs or events that you're having. You can send them through your partner liaison, and we're happy to get those promoted. We also have community groups in our community platform. And I know my colleague put that information in the chat, so you can join that way. And we have many virtual networking events, whether you're in Canada or the US. We have a couple coming up. So that's a great opportunity for you to get involved with our networking events and meet some of these amazing candidates. And we also, in some cases, have some in-person recruiting events as well. So happy to give you more information if you're interested in getting in touch with getting involved with those. And then we have a lot of training and education. We have this session, recruiter training. We also have quarterly sessions for managers, interviewers. We have a general awareness training coming up, all intended to support whatever resources you have internally. I will tell you, it's National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and maybe that's how you heard about the session and chose to join. So this is a great starting point for you to continue learning about all the opportunities for Disability Employment Awareness Month. We have another session on Thursday. That's for individuals with disabilities. And we have a number of other sessions throughout the month that we'll share in a follow-up email. Once you log into our platform, there are a number of different resources, webinars like this, where you can continue to learn and grow in your own awareness. We have a number of documents in there. We have our partner toolkit in there, talking about in more depth about onboarding interns, recruiting interns, candidates, not interns. We do have information about interns as well. Accessible technology. I'm sorry. So there's a lot of different important resources in there. And then we love to have a number of different live speakers who join us either virtually or at in-person events. On November 4th, we're having a session that's particularly focused on the experiences of people with ADHD. So we have different events like that throughout the year. And then finally, you can continue to grow in your own awareness around disability As I mentioned, I've been here 10 years and I'm always growing and learning and amazed at what I learned from our network members. So there's always something new to learn, and I encourage you to take that journey as well. You can do that through our community platform. I'm sorry. Your disability ERG is a really valuable resource. So take advantage of any events that they're having or any ways to engage with them and support their activity. And certainly as a recruiter, make sure that you're highlighting your disability ERG along with every other ERG that you might be talking about when you're selling a candidate on your company, because you never know who might have a disability that you're speaking with.